Hey, welcome back. Last time, guys, we talked a lot about independent advantages. You know what it means to be advantageous as an independent in maybe family-owned and operated restaurant in the community. But I think now it's probably important we talk about the disadvantages of what it is. Look, we all agree there's so many amazing things about the independent operations that dot our landscape and our communities, right? We all love them. We all patronize them. That's really our kind of our jam. But what about the disadvantages is really what I want to talk about today. And I guess starting with either of you, I couldn't care less who's more emotional about it, right? What do you guys want to talk about as far as the disadvantages are concerned? Because I think all of us agree there are disadvantages.
I'd like to hear Brian's take.
Well, it's because he had a good one off mic, right?
Exactly.
No, but happy to talk. I mean,
Are we going with Fat Brian or Skinny Brian?
there's nothing better than the silky sound of my own voice. But as I move the chair,
So we're going with narcissistic Brian.
But I think number one disadvantage is just like how some of the large food service companies, give unfair pricing to the national chains.
Define unfair.
Well, if your food cost is 8-9%, that's what they're getting charged over cost. I think you're gonna be at a disadvantage as someone paying, something more standard like, 18, 19, 20% versus if one of the big, food distribution companies, the national ones, are charging a local independent 32 or 34. Like when you
So they're charging the local guy more to make up their margins for shareholders or whatever because they can't afford to pay a national chain that they're charged the national chain that much because they're negotiating an economy of scale contract, right?
Correct, yeah, and it's you see it in everyday life, whether it's Olive Garden giving someone a meal and then letting them take one home too. In addition to that, like their food cost clearly is going to be lower than the local independent. So they're basically being taken advantage of because at the end of the day they're dropping more money to the bottom line than the local independent. Now, where does that money go? It doesn't go back into your community. It doesn't go back into your school system. It doesn't go back to your neighbors. It goes to Wall Street. It goes to somewhere other than your local community. Now, there's nothing wrong with Wall Street, and we all own stocks, and we love national companies. But the local independent, when you talk about a restaurant and someone making your food, you want that to be intimate. You want that to be someone that in the community that again, it's going into your body, and whether it's chicken wings or a lettuce wrap. I mean, you still want it to be made with, not to sound cheesy, but made with love and by someone who cares about it.
Yeah, true story.
No, for sure. And not to go down a rabbit hole, but when you talk about, it's shocking that restaurants don't pay the same for everything.
Yeah,
like Applebee's doesn't pay the same as Tony K's and Bria.
No. And
this episode brought to you by Tony K's.
Tony, if you're out there, please sponsor us.
Pay up.
And you see that, but I think it's also a misconception by restaurant owners, and maybe both of you could speak to this as far as like, I go to Costco and I get a really good price on a case of water or something like that. So does my neighbor down the street. When a restaurant does that, the price Applebee's is paying is not the same as the price that your local independent is paying. And why is that?
Well, I mean, it really shouldn't be, because it all comes back to you've got volume. I mean, when you're buying billions of dollars of food, the Cisco's or U.S. Foods or GFS out there, like they're gonna they're gonna treat those guys better because that's where the volume's at. Okay, I mean every distributor really has the same math problem.
Yeah,
it's just it's the best way to explain it is really to talk about what it's the big fish in a small pond. Really, okay. I mean, I feel like that's the best way to look at it. Like you could be a big 2-foot bass or whatever. I mean, I don't know anything about fishing. Maybe somebody in this room does, but is there bass that get to be 2 feet? Is that something that happens? I'm getting a nod. Okay, that happens. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I would have said surgeon or like
so you've got
walleye could be big.
Okay,
measured by pounds, but you can
pounds.
Okay, so yeah, I mean
it's one way of doing it.
Listen, I mean you could do pounds, I suppose. But so that 2-foot bass in your pond in your backyard is going to be a bigger deal than out in the Atlantic Ocean. You know what I mean? Sure. And that's the story. So as an independent operator, when you're buying from those bigger national chain distributors, it's a simple math problem. It's not their fault. It's not the distributor's fault. It's just how they do business.
It's kind of capitalism, right? Isn't that kind of how our whole economy is founded? And I think to go back where you said that, I struggle with the idea of misconception versus misleading, right? And I think a lot of operators too, maybe when they get in the business, and we talked about this earlier, is maybe they don't have a restaurant background and they come into the whole game a little naive, and then they have a salesman on the other end of them walking them down the wrong road, and they're like, hey, look, I like you, I trust you, and you tell me I'm getting good price and amazing service. Well, I don't have a benchmark to compare that to. And so again, when I talk about misconception, I think a lot of it's misleading, right? And there's a lot of purity and again, you got stars in your eyes, you're living the American dream, you're going to open a restaurant and you latch onto this person that you think you can trust, and you get led down the wrong path. I mean, we've all bought the wrong car before, right? It's kind of the same story.
No, I mean, it's in picking the right vendor is key to any business, and I think you see that over and over again. As far as your ability to pick a great vendor can really cure a lot of heartache and ills later on. Just for being a full service value add vendor. Oftentimes, at least been my experience, and I know our experience with it as a company is we provide more value to the customer than just maybe delivering boxes. Whether it's delivery times and the kind of blocking and tackling of a food service company, or it's help with the website, or help with a menu, or maybe different business advice on hiring, or point of sale advice. All the things that we've kind of learned from our friends and family as far as in the restaurant business that we're able to teach and educate and pass along to our customers.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah. So okay. So we talked about pricing disadvantage, right? So obviously you're up against it. And what are some ways to overcome this, Dave? I mean, obviously you've been in the business longer than any of us.
Well, I mean, the pricing disadvantage, like you can't really. I don't know if you can ever overcome that. You can just make it better. So do these large box distributors get better pricing than the local independent distributors? Yeah, they do, because they've got volume. Mm-hmm. Okay, but how they structure it and how they pass it along is really the difference. Because it's not passed along. Because there's 6 or 7 people in line before the customer. Stockholders. Presidents, vice presidents, 90 distribution centers. Like there's all this stuff and infrastructure that needs to be taken care of before the customer's taken care of. And when you're that big, it's tough. I mean, you walk into, your locally owned supermarket. You walk into a Dave supermarket, like Bert's on the register.
Yeah, it's great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, Bert's amazing.
You know what I mean? Like you walk into, a larger, establishment like a Giant Eagle or a Kroger's or whatever it is, that's not the case. You're walking in and the floor might be wet. You know what I mean? The things may be different, but I lost my train of thought on where I was going. So to go back to the pricing thing, like, so how do you overcome that disadvantage? I don't know if you can overcome it. You can just make it better. So how you make it better is, first of all, stop shopping from 5 or 6 different people. You know what I mean? Like, that's the first thing. Like, you have less volume to begin with, and you're going to divide it among 4 or 5 different distributors. I mean, that to me is the first thing that needs to happen.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Can I tell you the hard part about that from a chef standpoint is, look, like most companies are broadliners, meaning that they're generalists. They're not specialists, right? Yeah. And so when I want the very best fish, the very best meat, the very best produce, chances of one company having all 3 of those things, including price and service on top of it, are slim to none. And so I think a lot of times we learned, and I know I did, I think the first fine dining restaurant out of culinary school that I went to, we had at least 15 different purveyors. And I wish I could go back and work with that crew again, because I guarantee we could have made them so much more money. They'd probably still be in business today, just by narrowing that scope a little bit. More eggs in same baskets is imperative. I don't know if you can ever get all eggs in one basket, like 100% entirely from a chef standpoint anyway. I struggle with that. Because my menu wasn't static and I'm always looking for, puntarella or tilefish or blue nose bass or something along those lines. It's like way wacky and hard to get.
But is your broadliner more likely to stock some of those specific items and those specialty items?
And that brings up another great point. It depends on where you broadline. Yeah. If the smaller guy is going to be, as we talked about last time, the independent's flexible. It's nimble. It can do whatever it needs to do to make its customers happy. The chains are bound by bureaucracy. So getting a new item in at a big box store versus a small independent is exponentially different. The big box store, you get 6 to 8 weeks just to get one more SKU in their warehouse so you can actually get it shipped. And that's just get the SKU, let alone the product. Yeah. And independent, a lot of times you can get get it within a couple weeks, and sometimes quicker, depending on what kind of level of service you're getting.
Well, and the good news about what you just described is that all of these companies that distribute food, they have these guys that go around, and typically they've got laptops, and they, dress business casual, and they walk in and they say, "Hi, how are you doing? How's your weekend? Is there anything you need?" And they sell stuff. So give me that exotic fish. Give me one of those exotic fishes.
Yeah, I just said blue nose bass.
Okay,
Yeah.
so blue nose bass. So if somebody's a specialty seafood company, I don't know what blue nose bass costs, but I'm sure that
Do you buy it by the pound or by the foot?
that's a good question. That's a good question.
It depends on what size pound
I'm not a
it is.
chef, but I'm pretty sure that's how you buy it.
Listen, you can buy it by the pound if you'd like, but you want blue nose bass. Like, I don't know what that costs, but I'm sure the guy coming in selling that product would probably bring that to you.
Yeah.
So again, you want to consolidate as much as possible. Now, I can agree, and I can appreciate that maybe you can't get everything from one.
Yeah.
But you could probably, because you go through and everybody needs to deliver a certain amount of product consistently and all this stuff. And if you're running seafood specials every weekend, different fish, then you probably need that specialty guy that's going to deliver that special fish every weekend. But that's not to say you need, that guy and a meat guy and a produce guy and a specialty guy, for imports, and you want a grocery guy, and then there's
Right,
so
and
many.
do know, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
The more consolidation you have in your purchasing power, ultimately the better service and better prices you're going to get, and that's one way to combat what we just talked about. No question.
Yeah.
But again, the chef stigma or mantra on the other end of that is to get the best of the best ingredients, right? So like it's a struggle.
Sure.
And so there's no unicorn distributors out there that have the best of everything across the board. It just doesn't
Agreed.
happen.
Sure.
But the more you mitigate the diversity of your distribution or your purchasing, the more powerful you're going to become, or the bigger fish. It's kind of like the customer that walks in your restaurant, right? And they order that $3,000 bottle of wine on a special occasion. Like, you'll do anything for that person, right? Like,
There's $3,000 bottles of wine.
yeah, that happens. Like when you guys hit the big leagues, you'll
They
find
don't.
out.
Is that the ones that come in the jugs with the little
Carlo
finger
Rossi
handle?
bum
Like
jugs.
Is that it? Yeah.
That's what it is.
I didn't know there's I thought 13 was the highest it went.
Yeah.
3,000?
3-0?
I remember I went to a restaurant in New York once, and it's got to be early 2000s, and people weren't acclimated to the internet yet. And they had wine on their menu upwards of six figures, and they had to do like an immediate credit check before you were able to get the.
Could you
Hey, you want to
imagine?
be 3
You're
glasses
filling
deep
out a
before
form.
your Amex gets declined.
They're like, they were buying it from like an auction house, and they had someone to like verify the profile. I forget how it worked. It was so fascinating. Like, can you imagine having to wait a half hour? Like, so we're going to check your credit first to make sure this product
$100,000
transaction.
bottle of wine would cost how much? $30,000? What would be the cost? Of
No,
that?
you're not. Yeah, you're not going to do a 3 times markup on that. I bet if they're charging $100,000, they're probably paying 75. Or
Yeah, but I mean,
We're talking about a bottle of wine, not like a barrel.
Yeah, one
of
bottle.
wine. Like,
this isn't like a truck of wine, right? This is like one bottle. It's still expensive for the restaurant though, as far as they're holding that in inventory to have even a $50,000.
yeah, there's a ton of risk at that. But you do a 3 time markup on a $30 bottle, so it stays under 100, right? That's fair. You make $60 gross profit on that bottle of wine. That's fine. But we'll get to that.
We're leading into our next topic.
We'll get to that. But when you're and maybe I'm a little off base here, because maybe the person who's buying that $90,000 bottle of wine, they don't care about 90,000, just like they don't care about 200,000 or 300,000, right? It's all a drop in a bucket to them. But what I'm saying is, generally speaking, and I can just tell from my experience in the Cleveland market, if we'd have Opus One on the menu, or we would have some other like hoity-toity wine, we couldn't afford to do a 3 time markup because the market was a little more sensitive, price sensitive to it. The elasticity only went so far. So with Opus One, we were happy with a 60% cost of goods, because that 40% gross profit was supreme. It was better than we could do anywhere else, and it drove all our other variable expenses down.
But I also think you're finding a more educated consumer base.
Sure.
They know what Opus One costs. If you like Opus One, you know what it costs because you buy it every once in a while.
Yeah.
Like it's like, so you kind of know what the retail value is versus, what's a foot of halibut going for.
we're going to stay on this. This is good. This is good.
I mean, you don't necessarily know what the cost of
That's
those
the best
things
shit I've heard in a long time. I want 3 foot of halibut, please.
That's how it's sold.
I mean, it could be important. It could be a caterer. You needed to fill out the platter. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, listen, one of the things, and before we get off topic too far, one of the things I want to talk about, the disadvantage with independence is really the emotion in the business, right? And we talk about this a lot just around the office and things. We talk about how emotional the business is. And we talked about how dry and rigid corporations are, but there's a huge advantage to that, and that's the lack of emotion. And I find in my general consultation with customers and people alike, and whoever I come in contact with in restaurants, they tend to make emotional decisions. And you guys, are you familiar with this? How do you feel about them?
I totally agree.
Yeah, no, and especially I think you know, when you talk about the menu, which is really your prime marketing piece in a restaurant, you know, and you know you're looking at emotionally like, man, like I love that tuna sandwich, you know, or I love that, you know, that tuna
Yeah.
salad sandwich, and Joe comes in every Friday
And Joe's one of
afternoon
your
for
favorite
lunch,
people,
and
right?
and he, you know, and he gets free coffee and he eats a tuna salad sandwich and he's happy and we joke and he's, you know, we always have a good time, and then all of a sudden it comes down to looking at the menu and you're like, hey, pull the POS on the tuna sandwich, and it's like one a week, it's Joe, and but the owner was like, if he didn't look at that number, he'd have been like, he's so emotionally attached to the tuna sandwich, you know?
Yeah.
You know,
He
so
would think he is like a top seller.
exactly,
But that's what
yeah.
makes him feel good, right? Because he
And
goes
that's an
over to
extreme
Joe,
example, but you know, I mean, like that's what it boils down to, is that, you know, they're emotionally attached to an item because maybe it was their recipe, maybe it was the first thing they thought of when they opened the restaurant. That was what they built the concept around, or, you know, or whatever it is, like
grandma's
that.
tuna sandwich.
Exactly,
Yeah, there it
yeah,
is.
exactly.
I think to your point, it's 100% spot on. As far as the emotion is what we love about local independence, and but also as the owner, the restaurateur, they need to be careful of that and always still fall back on the data.
It can be detrimental really quick.
Because you have your
Yeah.
you have your point of sale system now, and you also have, you know, whether it's marketing, different social media analytics and Google analytics and things like that you're able to really look at the numbers. I mean, not to sound like a total nerd, but like Peter Drucker, you know, what is measured is managed. So like if you're not looking at these things and you're not really doing a deep dive on your menu as far as what's fast movers, what's your prime cost on those, what's your gross profit on those, which we'll get into all these things in later episodes. But I think that is really something that we all need to revisit and kind of remind ourselves, as far as like, I love the, you know, I love the you know, the calamari on the appetizer list, but is it a fast mover? What's the gross profit? What could I raise it $1 and people would still buy it? What's the quality of the product? Or what are the different things in that I can revisit, and or is there something that I need to jazz up about it, that it's getting stale?
Yeah, no, I think it's something that you know, the chain restaurants do a great job, is that, you know, they will change the menus, or they'll change items, and they really didn't change the item. It's still a chicken sandwich, but now it's a bacon avocado chicken sandwich, and they raise it $1.50, you know, because it's a different item. You know, so you look at the menu and it doesn't look like, you know, you just got screwed because the menu prices went up. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they're smart about it. You know what I mean? Where the independent, you know, again, talking about disadvantages, like they're not thinking through it that way a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's only about pleasing Joe and making sure that
Exactly.
tuna sandwich is $4.95. So there's two things I want to touch on about that. Is one thing that chains do is they look at contribution margin. And Brian, when you're talking about gross profit, it's like, how much money does this dish bring to the table, right? And when you really dive into the data, which we all know data does not lie. Like, the numbers are the numbers, whether you like it or not, or whether you feel a certain way, your numbers tell the truth. Dave, you had mentioned pulling up the POS. That's only like one side of it, right? So you get your velocity report or your menu mix. That's one report you run. You see, okay, I sold one tuna sandwich this week. Well, is it bad to have it on my menu? You know, I'm throwing away $3 worth of tuna a week. I'm making a customer happy. What's my gross profit on that dish? I find out my gross profit's $25. Well, that supersedes what I'm wasting. All of a sudden, I only sell one, but I make $25 every week on it. I'll keep it around. It's worth a line on my menu, right? So you always have that secondary kind of factor or layer that you got to consider, and that's the contribution margin, right? The gross profit and what it's bringing to the table.
Can you make $25 on a tuna sandwich? I lost you.
Yeah, it's really good tuna, like a five
gotcha.
5 feet of tuna boiled down.
That's what I thought. This is at the same restaurant with the $30,000 bottle of wine.
Yeah, this is a great restaurant. We're not playing games with our tuna, right?
What wine do you pair with tuna?
Yeah.
Like tuna salad. Like,
Tuna's like, anything you want.
is there a wine that goes with mayonnaise? Is there
I would go with a nice smoky Pinot to cross over, right? Because
gotcha.
you're dealing with a full-bodied fish anyway. I'm kidding. So anyway,
full-bodied fish?
When I look at two factors of that, I look at not only velocity, then I look at the contribution margin, and I don't care how I feel about a menu item. If those two numbers don't jive and don't give me what I want for sustainable business, it's off the menu. And I think that's one thing corporations do very, very, very well, is there's no emotion. For the same disadvantage they have of not being humanized.
Sure.
But they're super good at business decisions because it's black and white for them through and through. And I think as the independents, and I was one of them, like we get caught up in emotion. And sometimes it's detrimental. Sometimes it's helpful. And being emotional with your staff, great. Being emotional with your numbers, not so good.
Yeah.
It's something that you just have to keep on revisiting. And I think when people do it too, and you're not setting that emotion aside, you're embracing that emotion, but you're also embracing the data. And you're taking a look at that and being like, oh, that's surprising. And I think you'll hear that time and time again when you meet with someone and you go over the food costings and you put it in the matrix of, you know, fast mover, high profit margin, or what have you, and slow movers, low profit margin, which we want to obviously take off the menu.
Right.
But when you really look at it and look at the data and analyze it, I think a lot of people are always like, oh man, I love that bacon cheeseburger, but we're not moving a lot of those. And, it could be a trend, with a pasta dish, and carbs are out of style this week. So it could be something like that. And you constantly have to look at the data.
Yeah, that's it. I just hope you love the money in your bank more so than that cheeseburger, right? That's kind of the paradigm you have to shift.
And you can
Yeah,
always,
no question.
I mean, you can always make the cheeseburger for yourself.
That's
doesn't
fair.
mean you have to stop eating it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
There could be another local independent that sells a cheeseburger that you might like.
Yeah.
But
Nice-
to go back,
nice tie in there.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
to go back to the data, I always found it interesting when I was dealing with restaurant operators that you're coming in as a salesperson, or as you're trying to be maybe more of a consultant or whatever. But at the end of the day, like their interactions with you sometimes can become, what can I save? What can I do better out? And especially if the bank account's dropping,
Yeah.
or they feel like, they're doing inventory and food cost, and they're going, something's happening, whatever it is, like it always comes back to the distributor to solve that problem. You know what I mean? And sometimes it can be confrontational. Sometimes it can be, consultative, where they want to know, like, here's what's going on. How can I, how can I help it? But, I found it like shocking how many people, when they had a food cost problem, would say, Dave, I got a food cost problem. Like, I'm running 45% food cost. And my first question every time would be, well, what's the menu supposed to run? Mm-hmm. And 9 out of 10 times they don't know the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't do theoreticals on the front
exactly.
end. Exactly.
So when you look at a theoretical food cost versus an actual food cost, theoretically, if you know what price you're paying for things and you've costed things out, you should know that the menu's supposed to run, in that example, let's say the guy's running 45. Well, maybe his menu's priced at 42.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be as upset. I mean, he might still be upset, but he wouldn't be upset that there's something going on. We'd go back and re-engineer the menu.
And it's something to look at as far as what does your portions look like? Do you have portion control? Do you have evaporation and theft issues in the back of the house?
Shrinkage.
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 I mean, it's
Great episode.
It's real.
It's a thing. Yeah, it's a thing.
Whether it's grazing, I mean, even an employee eating, like someone eats 4 meals in a night, like that's gonna cost you money.
I can tell you, my first job was at McDonald's.
Okay.
And I ate a lot of what we called heart attack burgers.
Really?
And it was, McDonald's almost went out of business the year I worked there. Okay. It was literally, it was 2 patties with 2 pieces of cheese, 2 patties with 2 pieces of cheese, 2 patties with 2 pieces of cheese, smashed down.
6 burger? 6 patties?
Yes.
So that was what, 4 ounces total?
Probably, yeah. Looking back at my younger days,
So a
it
quarter
seemed like
pounder.
a lot. Yeah,
Quarter pounder with a quarter pound of cheese.
yeah. But we just smashed them down and
That sounds fantastic.
That's, You put that on the menu.
Hey, why don't we take a break and you can go get a couple of those now?
didn't pay for one of them.
Amazing.
Oh, that's not as
But
good.
There was a lot of
not as-
shrinkage going on
Not
at
as good for
that little
corporate.
McDonald's in Newton Falls, Ohio.
Yeah. So it's interesting you talking that because when we have this dilemma when food cost is high, and I've been there before again as an operator, and my food cost is out of whack. What do I look at first? I look at my distributor. Your prices are too high.
Yeah.
And listen, it's like most places, like they're in competition with other distributors. Generally speaking, here and there, they're going to want to be in a good pricing game, especially if you're calling them on it all the time. There's sometimes where, as an operator, you got to look at your own pricing, and I think that we fail to do that all the time. We don't keep up with things like inflation. We don't look at our benchmarks. Our rent gets raised, but we won't dare charge our customers more money, and that's so fascinating to me. We talk about the emotion in the business. You care about Joe and his tuna sandwich so much, but I can't charge Joe $5 instead of $4.50. No. Well, I'll be honest, 50 cents probably isn't going to break the bank, and from Joe's standpoint, he probably really enjoys coming in for that tuna sandwich on a Friday afternoon. 50 cents to keep it around and keep you around, he'd probably be pretty happy to pay, right? But
So when you were on that end, when you were a chef and you were running restaurants, you had that mentality at one point, right?
Oh, yeah.
Costs are out of line. And
my biggest
distributors-
mistake
yeah.
ever was trying to make money by saving money.
Yeah.
I should have just had pricing courage and just put it out there.
Well, that's exactly what it is. I mean, if you look at and go to the advantage disadvantage, you look at the corporate chains and you look at. I was doing some research and I went to Chipotle. $2 for guacamole on a burrito. So you have a $6 item and $2 for guacamole.
33%.
Yeah, that's impressive. But
Yeah.
they ran the numbers and said, you know what's delicious? Guacamole. You know what?
You know what people pay $2 for?
Guacamole. Yeah. But as opposed
and they
to,
hand smash it, right?
Yeah, but as opposed to being like, all right, our food costs are this, and we should charge 20 cents above that, and to make our money. And no, they're like, no, $2. That's what we're gonna get. So and guess what? I put guacamole on my burrito.
You don't even bat an eye.
Not even bat an eye.
Yeah.
Didn't even hesitate because one, I like guacamole. Two, it makes the meal much better. Like and that's what our customers are willing to do. Like they want to, they want a great culinary experience, and they're always willing to, I think, pay for the little bit of extra that is adding to the value, adding to the benefit.
Yeah, the value and the experience. Exactly. Yeah. No, totally agree.
Oh, true story.
So what do you guys think on the marketing end with local independents? We talked a little bit in the previous episodes about, the national chains having these big marketing budgets and doing all the different stuff. Like what can a local independent operator do, that, what does that disadvantage look like, and what can they do to improve that?
I think even beyond marketing, you're dealing with the whole infrastructural issue that we'll get to. But from the marketing standpoint, yeah, I mean, can the mom and pop on a corner afford to put a TV on or a commercial on primetime TV like during the Super Bowl? No way. It's not going to happen, right? But certainly the corporate competition can. You see it all the time. The one solution that we had, and I thought they always did a really great job, was Cleveland Independence. And, it started out as Cleveland Originals back in maybe like the late 90s, early 2000s, and you paid a monthly membership fee, and then it became this conglomerate, right, of maybe 80 to 100 restaurants that work collectively with a collective budget to advertise as a unit. Now, you didn't get the individual exposure, but at least you had some sort of clout in the playing field, because with 80 people in with that kind of money, you could afford an ad in Bon Appetit, or you can afford this or that, or whatever the case may be. Your prowess was so much higher.
Sure.
And they're still going strong today, but now there's other factions out there I think you can jump into.
I think the kind of the disadvantage is, the big corporate chain has a marketing department, and they have all the money to throw at social media, and their website's amazing, and it's responsive, so it looks good on a cell phone. But I think for a fairly small budget, your local independent can for $2,500 get a awesome looking website and establish all of the social media websites. But it's really up to that local independent. This is where the disadvantage comes to an advantage. They can man those social media sites and pick their platforms, whether it's Instagram, which I think the kids call Insta. I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm trying to get the gram.
The gram.
So I'm trying to get started, but
So-
I think Insta's going to
How's that
stick.
working out for
So
you?
I had a meal the
Yeah,
other
put a
day.
hashtag in
I had a
front of
meal
it.
the other day. It was grammable. I wasn't sure what that meant.
Grammable.
Or Insta?
Oh God!
I don't know.
I'm aging progressively as I sit at this
I can
table
see you
with
aging.
guys.
That's definitely.
Yeah.
It's not only the
I'm
hair.
like 75. Walked in 39, walking out 75.
But I also think at this point, like, it's 8 to 80 now with social media, and that someone come in and have a bad experience, they now have the microphone or the
soapbox.
The soapbox to stand on. But conversely, now so does the restaurant. And as long as someone's manning that and responding to that, and listening to that customer, if they have a bad experience, that person you also want to say, hey, would love to give us a second shot. We fix this, or we recognize this, or whatever the issue is, so that person feels heard. You can't always just like the good comments. You have to address the bad ones.
I think that some of the more powerful stuff is you have an audience to see how you handle your conflict resolution is tremendous, because you can say, hey, look, I'm a nice person. I do nice things. I care about my customers.
I'm an actual person.
That's it. Yeah, there you go.
This is this isn't some sort of algorithm robot that I push back a
The bottom of the email doesn't say, do not reply to this email.
Yeah,
no
correct.
one monitors this inbox. No.
Yeah. Like,
I put that on my signature anyway.
it's probably the restaurant's name at gmail.com. Like,
Yeah,
they don't
right.
even have the domain. Like, it's all the little things where it's like, no, at this point you can be more intimate with your customer base. And again, we're not talking millions of people. We're talking the people in your local community that are driving to your restaurant, that are coming to your establishment, and are leaving reviews. I mean, there's no excuse, in my opinion, for an owner, an operator to pass that opportunity to talk to his customer base.
So if, on the marketing end, so if you guys owned a restaurant right now and you wanted to get your social media going, but you didn't know where to start, I feel there's, and this may not be a chain versus local disadvantage, but I feel like just in marketing in general, there's, anybody that's got an Instagram account or a Facebook account or whatever it is, like, they can, as long as they know more than you do, they're the expert. Okay?
Yeah,
So you've got these people
Theory
that
of
are out
relativity.
there, charging various amounts a month to handle these types of things. And local independent restaurants are doing it sometimes they're not, when they should, and sometimes they are when they shouldn't. How do you get through, like, who's the expert? How do you identify an expert when you really don't know?
All right, so we're back from our little break there, and in mid thought, it's it's getting really pumped up there. Brian, you were talking about social media and talking about how revolutionary it is for the business, and you had given a couple examples. And one of the things I really wanted to touch on is one of the biggest mistakes I think restaurants make is you had said that there's a real person behind it, right? And that's important. But yet we tend to do every Friday morning, we put out our specials on Facebook or Instagram, or I refuse to call it Insta, I apologize. And actually, I don't apologize. I refuse to call it Insta.
That's okay. You don't have to be as dope as us.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't want to be awesome, that's one way of doing it.
That's fair. So anyway, back to my thought at hand here. So the biggest deal is Friday morning at 10 o'clock, we queue it up and it says, come to Joe's, all you can eat fish, $11.99, right? Tacos Tuesday comes around and we say tacos $2 a piece, and Wine Down Wednesday comes, wine 50% off, and what did we give? Like we're trying to get people in, and we're just broadcasting. That's all we're doing is broadcasting on deaf ears. And when you have the advantage of being a human behind it, and this may be like one of the biggest advantages of the independence I talked about. My favorite thing was like uniqueness and individuality. You're behind the social media. Engage with your audience. Again, people want to know the owner. They want to be connected to. Engage with them. Talk every comment. Everything you can do to humanize your business, to make it an extension of you, I think is arguably the maybe the most imperative thing you could do to drive business through social media from a marketing standpoint. Because again, they can't take the you out of you, right? Like that's cheesy and corny, but it's the truth. No competition is you. You always have you. So exploit the shit out of you on social media.
I think you're 100% right. And it comes back to that sense of community. And how do you use that platform, whether it's Insta or Facebook or something rad like that?
I do say rad though, actually, but that's
say rad?
Yeah, that's more of like a kind of paying homage to the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I had dreams of being a BMX racer. Rick Norris, shout out to you.
Very nice.
Yeah.
But just to have that sense of community and really foster that by, like you said, responding to the comments and giving people information and updates about the restaurant to kind of foster that, because it's a lot cooler to have, whether it's a trivia night or it's Wine Down Wednesday or what have you, is people really want to interact with other people, and that's what it's about. And they're not just looking for a coupon, or they're looking for an update as to you added Absolute to the drink menu. Like that's maybe not as interesting.
Right, it's good information, but yeah, you're not engaging me in any way. You're just letting me know. Oh, okay, that's nice. I want you to really captivate me, though. I want you to grab me.
And again, social media is so large. There's so many things. I mean, we're constantly like. I mean, I think I do this in my sleep.
Yeah.
We're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. There's so much information. If you're just broadcasting, like you're just blending into the ocean of everything else.
Right.
Like what are you doing now? Like, as a local independent operator, like what's the most interesting thing? Like what's the story? I mean, I would love if an independent restaurant just went and the owner just, did a 2-minute spiel on how they got started. What happened, why did he get in the restaurant business?
Yeah,
What, I mean, like that would be,
why is your name so weird?
Correct. Yeah. But you could do those things on a, maybe not daily, but multiple times a week, those little tiny things, and really draw people in. So then all of a sudden you've got your Friday fish fry you want to talk about. Well, they're already engaged in what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Oh, by the way, we got fish. Yeah, sounds good. I'll be there.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, but it gives a connection. Like you're like, man, that's a really cool story. Like maybe Joe will be in on Friday. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm going to go, sit at the bar and, have dinner with my wife. And, I mean, it's a different level of connection, going back to community, like you said.
It isn't it, but I also think people really enjoy that and eat that up. Like, excuse the pun, but like it is something that I want to know. I always ask, like when I'm meeting with a new restaurant or a client or what have you. It's like I want to, like, how'd you get your start? What made you do this? Where are you from? Did you always, was your family in the restaurant business, or is this totally new? And what has been some of your successes? What have been some of your failures?
Yeah, it's like their brand story, right?
It is,
Yeah.
But it's also like I think we all try to put too much of a polish on our own brands when people don't really care about that. They want to know about what are your successes, what are your failures, what are the things that you do differently, what do you love, what do you care about, what are you passionate about, and part of that is always the food and it's always the experience at the restaurant, but they want to hear your complete story, because that's what resonates with them, and that's what makes them identify you as a human and part of that community.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and to go kind of full circle, the advantage, disadvantage, but that's where the local independent, punches the national chain in the throat, because it's such a affront to everything that they're about.
Yeah.
Like their brand story was designed by a marketing team and had A/B tested and was punched up by an ad agency to make it even better. When like a local independent selling truth, selling what it is.
It's organic.
It is
Yeah.
organic.
Yeah,
it's
it's organic.
natural.
Yeah.
So
You can't make that stuff up, right?
you can't.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
I don't care how good of a team you have. So I just think we talked about how the disadvantage became an advantage real quick, right? Like how to leverage that. I think that's fantastic.
Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of Restauranttopia.